One of the most common questions I got asked while I was doing the race to 100 on hardcore live streaming was, how did I keep my Fury up so well? And I'm going to try and answer that question here quickly for you, for both early game players and also for late game players, and hopefully give you some suggestions on how you can improve your whirlwind uptime. And actually, this kind of applies to all builds. For the Barbarian, but I will also include a link to a video that I've just done that does a full breakdown of the endgame build as well, if you're interested in that. There's things like the talent tree and everything that you can look at on a build website that will be of use for you. But anyways, let's jump into what my recommendations would be for an early game player in order to get their Fury up. So the first thing I would do is spec into as much Fury generation as possible. Enhanced Whirlwind is a good start here. You'll generate Whirlwind when you hit enemies, and you'll have to become quite proficient in making sure that you're coming, from pack to pack as fast as possible in order to keep that Whirlwind time up, and by extension, keep your Fury up. And then we're going to use Rallying Cry, which also increases the amount of Fury that we generate, as well as taking Tactical Rallying Cry, which will give us a boost to both the initial, generation of Fury. Actually gives us 20, and then increases the effect of the shout furthermore. And then Tactical Challenging Shout does the same thing again, except now we generate Fury when we're getting hit, which is actually a lot of time for the Barbarian. Then we're going to take Enhanced Warcry for Berserking, and the reason we go for that is because we go into Prolific Fury here, which increases our generation even more while we are berserking. And then Booming Voice increases the duration of these shouts in order to get more benefit from them. And we actually synergize with that a little bit more with something else I'll show you in just a second. As far as ultimate goes, when you start to get into the little later levels, you can then go into Wrath of the Berserker, which will give you even more Fury generation, which is absolutely bonkers. And so at this point, you're going to be starting to feel a lot smoother than before. However, when you get to your key passive, the temptation is going to go for Unbridled Rage immediately. But this is the damage, this is the juice here, but it really does tank your Fury very, very quickly. And even with all of these talents, you'll probably find it emptying your tank pretty damn quick. So I would recommend, at least until you have a couple of legendary aspects behind you, maybe even some Paragon nodes in place, to run unconstrained. It's not perfect, but actually doing a Whirlwind, even if it's doing less damage, is better than standing there waiting to do one. So play around with that, and then maybe periodically go back to Unbridled Rage and see at which point it starts to feel smooth for you. As far as gear recommendation goes, in the early game, a lot of these stats will be a lot harder to get, but if you are lucky enough to come across some cooldown reduction on your helmet or your necklace, that can help dramatically because you're able to now shout more often, which allows you to get those benefits of resource regeneration. Bold Chieftain and also Echoing Fury. Now, these are actually two, not Bold Chieftain, sorry. That's a late game one. Let me just sort of dial that back a bit. At least Echoing Fury can be gotten from a dungeon. Now, it's from Siriko Caverns, which is in Kyrgyzstan. If you haven't gotten this already, as with any aspect that you've not already got, if you just left click on it, it will now mark it on the map for you. So you should have a Google Maps pin that will show you exactly where you need to go in order to unlock that Codex of Power, just to make your life a little easier. Now, these are, I believe, level 35 dungeons, so you will have to wait a minute before going in. But Echoing Fury, your shouts now generate 2 Fury per second, and that's the bad version of it. There are better versions you can actually find on Legendary Gear that do up to 4 Fury per second. Now you can start to see why having our shouts up all the time is really, really important. And then the one that I would also go for in the early game, because you can guarantee get it from the dungeon here, is Aspect of the Umbral. And what this will allow you to do is generate primary resource every time you crowd control an enemy. And the great thing about that is that we actually are crowd controlling enemies, sorry, pressing every wrong button possible here, through Challenging Shout. So when you challenge shout, when you do this, you'll taunt all the enemies nearby, and that counts as crowd control. So when you use this, you'll get an absolutely absurd burst of resource regeneration. practically like an entire orb every single time, especially if you remember to do Rallying Cry first to increase its effectiveness. So that is very, very good. And actually the exact same, when you use Wrath of the Berserker, you knock everything around you away, which can then also generate a nice burst of fury. That's what I would go in the early game. Now back to the gear here. In the late game, you're going to want to go for Bold Chieftain, and this allows you to reduce the cooldown of your shouts by up to 6 seconds if you do it with enough enemies around. It's this ring. And in the later game as well, you'll want to go for Fury Cost Reduction. You won't see this until a little bit later on, but you can get this on your boots and also on your neck. This is a massively important stat for us. And then finally, when you hit the really late game, once you're in tier 4, you can then start to find resource generation on your rings, which will give you a really nice boost. At this point, this is where like you basically have unlimited rage as long as you're hitting like, you know, one enemy. And that, I believe, is everything in terms of what you can do through build and skills. Quickly for the Paragon, I won't stay on this for too long, because it is all included in my build video. But if you're going to be taking some nodes, the most important ones are going to be Martial for you, cooldown reduction on shouts, Wrath, which is going to allow you to regen Fury on crit, and then also these rare nodes over here will give you Fury on kill, as well as way up here I have Imbiber and no, sorry, Disembowel. I say Imbiber because I swapped these two around earlier on, but yeah, this one will allow you to again even further reduce your cooldown by killing enemies that are bleeding, and the Whirlwind build basically is always bleeding the enemies. A tip I would have is actually have Disembowel here and take Imbiber later on, and then switch the two around when you have access to the full board, because I believe, you know, personally I believe that this is more important. It's just here because it's, you know, it makes better use of the surrounding nodes later on once you have access to the full tree. As for uniques, which again is extremely end game stuff, if you can get your hands on a Rage of Harrogath, it's like I'm a broken record, reduces the cooldowns of your shouts, and that's really how this whole build really works. It's getting that shout uptime to as close to 100% as humanly possible. And that's everything that I can think of. If I've left anything unclear, don't be afraid to ask. And yeah, just try and put everything together. Just remember, this is quite an aggressive build. All of this kind of revolves around you being very, very aggressive in the fights. I guess that's kind of where the skill comes from. It's very easy to kind of look at it and just think you're holding down right click and that's it. But the real talent in this build is resource management and cooldown management, and making sure you're doing all of that correct. If you're on hardcore, just be careful when you're being aggressive. Perhaps sometimes it's better to sit out of a fight and wait for your shouts to come off cooldown, because they're also your defensives as well as your offensives. And yeah, I mean, any more questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Of course, the full build will be in the description below. I'll go into depth for the end game build. There will be an early game build coming a little bit later on. That requires a little bit more preparation. I want to make sure that is very clear from start to finish. And yeah, if you liked the video, don't forget to give it a like. I really do appreciate that, and it really helps get the videos out to people. And subscribe if you want to catch more content like this, guides on Diablo. Also, you'll get notified as of when I live stream, which I do here on YouTube. I know that's a bit strange, not many people do that, but that's where I'm at. And if you're subscribed, you'll actually see when I've scheduled them in, which is pretty cool. And thank you for watching. I really hope this helps, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye.